This will be an open conversation on crafting content for an ever-changing world while finding the means to connect with local communities and global audiences in new, more meaningful ways. That's a run-on sentence, but I think it's proper grammatically. That being said, I want to introduce our distinguished panel, and I will go, let's see, I think you guys are sitting in the right order. We'll make it work. I'll just start to my immediate left. Our good friend and chair emeritus of the MMFM, Prashant Shah, is with us. As I mentioned briefly, unfortunately, Mena could not be with us due to some production delays that he was having, but we do have Mr. Shah with us, and we're going to show a really cool reel from Prashant, so we're happy that you can join this panel, sir. Much appreciated. Just to his left is someone that you heard from fairly recently, Helena Mckenzie, who was on our UK panel. As I mentioned before, she is the head of Inward Investment and Business Development at Film London and the lead for the London agency's Equal Access Network, which she will be elaborating more on this panel. So welcome, Helena.
Thank you.
And then, of course, we have a very special guest, the Honorable Commissioner Raquel Regalado from District 7, Miami-Dade County's Board of County Commissioners. Welcome, Commissioner. And we have a good friend visiting us from Vancouver, who made her first appearance at our virtual MMFM, but we're so glad that she's with us here in person. Brenda Gilbert, who is the co-founder and president of BRON Media Corporation. Amazing body of work that they've built over the past decade, whose credits include everything from Joker, House of Gucci, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Bombshell, Licorice Pizza, Judas and the Black Messiah. I think I got it all in one breath. That also includes...
That was just in the morning, right?
That was just in the morning, yes. Not to mention 32 Academy Award nominations and being part of 6 Academy Award wins. Welcome, Brenda, to the panel. And just to her left is another good friend of the MMFM, Miss Emily Shaw is with us today. Actress, producer, and just an amazing talent. So we're actually going to kick it off, Emily, with a trailer from one of your recent films, Jungle Cry. So let's just kick it off. Oh, it opened today. That's a good producer right there. So the man knows how to market. This film did just open today, so make sure that you watch it immediately following the conference. That's very cool. Alrighty. So, Emily, now your dad started the pitch, so I want you to continue it. Tell us a little bit more about Jungle Cry and your role in it specifically.
So we actually shot Jungle Cry in Wales. It was honestly one of the best productions we could have had because of the commission in Wales and the people that were in Wales. You know, a lot of people shoot in London and they believe that London and Scotland is a place to shoot, but I'm telling you, the people in Wales are so incredibly nice, and the film commission is really, really nice too. But I really did enjoy it because rugby does come from Wales, and so it just made sense to actually shoot there. But we shot this film, you know, pre-COVID, was supposed to release April 17th of 2020. Obviously that didn't happen, and so we had a delay of 2 years. Finally came out on Lionsgate Play India on June 3rd, and it released today on Apple subscription. So yeah, so you'll be able to check it out. But you know, I was a part of Jungle Cry as an actress as well as an executive producer, and kind of, you know, juggling the whole industry of working between India and the U.S. Obviously, we know that Bollywood is one of the biggest entertainment industries in the world, almost just as big as Hollywood, if not almost bigger. You know, I know Spanish is a second speaking language in the USA, but every Friday a Bollywood film will release. I stole that line from my dad, so he can't say it anymore. But every Friday a Bollywood film will release in the USA, and now we're seeing even South Indian films that are creating massive explosions in the industry, like RRR, that had, you know, just made millions and millions of dollars recently. So the Bollywood and Indian industry in cinema is really taking over. We're seeing that South Asians, especially in America and Hollywood, are making a splash in the market. We're noticing a lot more roles with diversity in them. The thing that I wanted to kind of touch base on was, you know, it really starts with the people that are in the production. So the people that are writing, the producers, the executives, when you write a script and you have the name Karen versus Karan, you're obviously going to cast somebody who is probably Caucasian. So I was taught even in college when I was taking a class at Amazon that if you want to diversify your roles and you want to diversify the scripts and the content that you're making, write those names. Write that name so the casting director has an idea, okay, we have to cast somebody who is of an ethnic background or descent. The other thing that I am noticing with South Asians, especially in the market, is that there is a shift happening where they're kind of being stereotyped. So we went from, being the gas station owners or the nerds or the terrorists, and now we're kind of having this role where we're playing the leads and we're playing, the leading woman or the leading man. So it's a really exciting time to be ethnic and to be brown and to kind of embrace that. I'm half white, half, Indian, so I kind of juggled between the two growing up, but in this industry with the digital age that's coming about, you don't just have to be, an artist in Hollywood or in Bollywood or in the UK or Korea. You can kind of be an international artist. And I think that's what's something that is so powerful about today's day and age of being an artist in this industry.
Wow. Oh, Prashant, I was going to let you add to that, but I think your work here is done, my friend.
It's called diversity.
Yes. That next generation. So, Prashant, obviously, and as Emma mentioned, you're a producer as well. Talk a little bit about sort of the cultural nuances of bringing this sort of Indian story, and then Wales, a very sort of Welsh sport, but also bringing these sort of unique cultural elements and making it universal at the same time.
The fact of the matter is that, when British left, we said, you can't go, we're coming with you. So here we are now in England, and not only in sports, but also in other businesses, that the diversity and inclusion had taken up. And of course, looking at the fact that when you have tribal kids who have never played a game, and a rough game without pads and without masks, and then to bring them into from 40 degrees to 4 degrees Celsius temperatures, and creating that diversity and telling that unsung hero story. It doesn't have to be Indian, doesn't have to be a ethnic background, but of course when you talk about diversity and bringing into sports, and sports is something which I firmly believe that when you give a kid a gun or a camera, I would rather give the camera as opposed to the gun, because you can shoot better things than shooting what you could with the gun. And creating that, and this was a topic that we were just talking at lunch. So it's very important to bring the diversity into entertainment, because if you look at the top shows right now, whether it is Squid Game or whether it is Money Heist or international, today language is not a barrier to produce content. I, as a producer, do not see that you have to have a language in order to produce a content. I mean, people are watching something, but they're reading a lot. And that is what is changing the world, and that is what is changing the industry. And whether it is nomad or no matter which diversity you look at it, today it is a global content world, and we don't have theaters. I mean, I have produced cinemas only for theaters, but today we produce for all the digital screens that are in handheld devices, a little over 8 billion. That does not require a specific language to be understood, because Money Heist is being made in India in a Bollywood version, it's made in Korea in the Korean version, and so forth. Now the Squid Game, we are talking about creating into different languages, and the franchises that we have seen of cinemas over the years, that is becoming into multiple languages, whether it was Casablanca made back in the Hollywood days, is so many, the same story, a romantic story is made in so many languages today. So I personally feel that, language is just a myth. It's no longer a reason to make cinemas.
Well said.
So it's, I think apropos quote to also be the change you want to see in the world. And to that effect, I'd like to pass it over to the commissioner now and have you speak on what you briefly mentioned earlier.
I'll take this one.
Absolutely. So the first, this is an accomplishment, the first Miami-born Hispanic woman elected to the Miami-Dade County Commission. Congratulations on that.
Well, so first of all, it's a pleasure. There is such a thing as native Miamians. I know no one believes that. We have a small group, but we're getting bigger by the day. So yes, so thank you for that. So in my prior life, I was actually a school board member. So I'm actually the first school board member elected to the Miami-Dade County Commission too. So it's a whole other thing. But so really quickly, my background, because it'll explain a little bit of the work that I've been doing and why I'm here. So my dad actually came to the United States in the Peter Pan flights. So he came as a young child, and my mother a few years later, and they met at a party. And he worked at Channel 7 at the time. He was the first Hispanic to be hired by Channel 7. He did a weekend show, and they became friends. And he used to do radio. He started doing radio. That was his second job. So he got her a gig as a nighttime DJ, and it just so happens, very conveniently, that he was the morning anchor. So she was the nighttime DJ, he was the morning anchor, and he got what he wanted. The story is that he stalked her until she finally married him, and had the two of us. I was raised in a radio station. All my baby pictures are in the studio. And then later on, my grandfather came from Cuba and also came to work at the radio station. So he would pick us up from school and take us to a radio station. My parents were huge into child labor, as was the radio station. So back then, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. Back then, we used to do the novelas, the radio novelas. And why would you hire a tech when you have these two kids who could do like the hoofs,
Right.
and the doors? So my brother and I were, sound techs like at 6. And by 9, they had taught us to use the boards so that people could, go get lunch, go to the bathroom, see their girlfriend. So we had like mad skills by the time that we were 13, just, growing up in a radio station. And then my parents transitioned into doing TV also. And even though I never really intended to go into media, I worked in media in high school and in college just because I had these mad skills that I had like acquired before. But I ended up going to law school and becoming an attorney and working in media law because, of course, it just kind of followed you. And my older brother went into radio and TV, and my little brother actually was a videographer and worked for the Discovery Channel for many years. So my father was very proud, as are you, that 3 of his children went into the industry that he had chosen for them. So he was very happy. But I had escaped, as an attorney, and then my mother passed away when I was 33, and my dad, she had this radio show for 30 years, and my dad said, can you cover your mother's radio show? Okay, fine, I'll cover my mother's radio show. So I was a patent attorney at the time, and I would take my lunch, at the radio station where I would do this like 1-hour Spanish language radio show. 15 years later, I am still on Spanish language radio, so it's been a long stretch. And I've actually transitioned, I started doing, Cuban radio. Now I work for a Colombian station. I started doing an hour show. Now I do a 3-hour show. I did TV in the middle of that. But what gets us to, diversity, inclusion, and equity is when my mother passed away, my daughter was also diagnosed in the autism spectrum. And my dad at the time was running for mayor. He had been a commissioner and he was running for city of Miami mayor. And after his election, I was just having a very difficult time finding placement for Isabella. And we were, having dinner, and I was complaining, and he said, stop complaining. If you really want to do something, run for office. I don't think he meant it. I think he was just kind of like, stop talking about this topic. But I took him up on it. I ran for office. I became a school board member. And then in the true media fashion, I outed myself in the Miami Herald by writing my own op-ed and telling everyone that my daughter was autistic, right? Because, leave it to us to, go big or go home. And I became an advocate for autism over a decade ago when a lot of people were not talking about it. So my daughter turns 19 in August. I was a school board member for 2 terms, and now I'm a county commissioner. And I left the school board. I did some great work there, but I really feel that when it comes to disabilities, we've done a lot in the school districts, and there's a lot of understanding of the services that we need to provide children. But, at 22, everyone goes off a cliff, and there's not a lot, and there isn't a conversation about it. People just go home or go somewhere else. So that's why I left the district. And I'm here to talk to you about, the concept of intellectual diversity. So we talk about, diversity and inclusion and equity. And normally when we talk about diversity, we talk about, ethnicity, and obviously, I'm Hispanic. So, or we talk about gender, and there's so much, conversation over those two terms. And I think we've really gotten far in understanding how, diversity adds to the work environment and how people relate to diversity, right? To your point earlier about language, I agree with you. And I think we're at a point where the world has gotten smaller, and you watch what you relate to. It's not what language it's in, because now technology allows us, to see things in different languages. So like one of my favorite shows is Borgen, because I can relate to Borgen. I'm a female elected, right? There's not a lot of smart shows about female electeds. Most shows about female electeds make us look like idiots. That's another story. So to have like a centered female elected, right, was cool. But in the case of my kids, a show like Peanut Butter Falcon or a show like Love on the Spectrum, is very relatable for them, because they see themselves in those shows. And you could produce that show in any language, and my children would watch that, because I think that's the connection that we're all seeking, and that's the connection that we're all finding. Although I got to say, I do watch Bollywood. A lot of Hispanics do. It's like a thing. It kind of aligns with our novela thing. That's another story. It's very relatable to us. We totally get it. We get the overbearing dad. Like it all matches up. It all matches up for us in terms of cultural similarities. So now as a county commissioner, what I've done is really focus on this concept of neurodiversity. I have, my son was later diagnosed on the spectrum also. So I have two autistic children that are now 17 and almost 19 respectively. My daughter is mid-spectrum and my son is higher functioning. And speaking of Love in the Spectrum, this summer my son did a computer camp with Danny from Love in the Spectrum. So he actually got to be taught by her, and he was so awestruck by the whole thing that he got to be in her class. I have two of them, and they're very different, and their paths are very different. But what I've tried to do here is talk about neurodiversity, right? So people don't see it just in terms of autism. So what is neurodiversity? We are neuronormal, and they are neurodiverse, because the idea of using the term intellectual disability is disparaging, right? They just think differently. And so who thinks differently from the neuronormal? There's a lot of people. There's people in the autism spectrum. There's people who have ADD and ADHD. There's people who have dyslexia. There's people who have Downs. There's people who, actually at the far end, when everything from brain trauma, to neurological issues as a result of trauma, to dementia, to Alzheimer's. That's all part of neurodiversity. So it's a very, very broad spectrum. And what we've been trying to do is educate folks on that greater umbrella. Epilepsy is also there, so that people understand that they have abilities separate and apart from their disabilities, and that they want to work. And this is what I hope you take away. A lot of people think that people with disabilities don't want to work. That couldn't be further from the truth. And we have the data to show it. They want to work. They understand the concept. They want to be adults. They want to contribute. They want to be part of a community. Autistic people, a lot of folks think that they're antisocial. They're actually not. Some of them are hypersocial. And if you've met one, you've met one, so you really don't make, judgments about all of them, because they're all very different and they all have different interests. So what have we done at the county? We decided to, kind of tackle the employment piece by training, our workforce, starting at the county. And we did a training for all of our police officers, because a lot of neurodiverse people are arrested erroneously just because someone doesn't understand what's going on, right? They're having a reaction that looks like they're on drugs or looks like something else. So we trained our police officers, and that's been phenomenal. We trained all of our library workers. We created social stories, and really opening up public spaces to neurodiverse people. And I explained to folks that, if you would have told me a few years ago, I'll meet you at a library with your kids, I would say, why do you hate me? And why do you want me to go to that place? because the idea of taking neurodiverse people like to a place where everyone has to be quiet and well behaved just sounds like the third ring of hell, right? So now, you know, there's a special space for them. We have signs where you can be quiet, where you can talk. We have social stories. We've trained everyone. No one's going to scream at us when we go, and it's been very successful. We're working on parks and transit. You know, our county employees have been so open to this training that we actually had folks that I did not include demand to be included. Our corrections department, our fire department, emergency management. So it's really been wonderful. And now the next step is taking the data that we've learned from all these trainings and creating something that we can use on the employment side, you know, and we have a few businesses that are going to be incubators. We're working on an ecosystem map, and we're very excited with what you're doing, and we want to copy it. So we'll talk about that later. But the idea is to find different areas where they can do this work. And why is now a perfect time? Because the world has an employment crisis. The pandemic, you know, was a midlife crisis for everyone. And a lot of people have decided to change, you know, what they're doing. And now it's for us, the representatives of adults with disabilities, an opportunity to have people take a chance on who we believe are amazing individuals who have a tremendous work ethic, who will make your life the better if you allow them into your workspace and into your life. So I am forever an advocate. I can tell you that my children have made me a better person. The way they see the world is enchanting. If you allow neurodivergent people into your life, they will show you something amazing, and you will love them and promote them like the rest of us. Thank you.
Amazing.
Well, Commissioner, to echo your dad's words, keep running for office, okay? Because it's helping. All right, so Helena, let's go over to you, my friend, and talk a little bit about, you know, the Commissioner mentioned copying. I say more of an homage about your Equal Access Network and what you're doing specifically on that front.
So there's actually a couple of things that I wanted to talk about regarding it's not just the Equal Access Network, but actually 18 months or so ago, into the pandemic, Julian, my colleague who's here with me here, he's our animation consultant, and we together wrote a new strategy for our animation work. And we wanted to make sure that actually, because when everyone kind of started working from home, and the pandemic, you know, struck, and suddenly everyone is working from home, and it occurred to us, and we were having discussions about actually how that made it easier in some ways for physically disabled people to work in animation, because they probably wouldn't be able to get into the office before or be able to move around an office. And if they're working from home now, that they can actually do that. So we started to look into that in more detail, and actually very much incorporated disability into our new animation strategy. And actually what we thought was quite a good way to do that in terms of not just recognizing and, you know, changing and listening and, you know, our own, you know, sort of thoughts and everything, was also to make sure that our employers were not too scared to employ somebody that is a little bit different from them. And that comes down to language often, and it's about, you know, making sure that the language that the employers are, we want to educate the employers to speak to people in that way. And it sounds kind of crazy, but it's just, you know, if they can understand kind of what they can and can't say. People have a nervousness about what they can say to somebody, and they don't want to offend anybody and all of this kind of stuff. So it's kind of like getting that out in the open and being open about it. And it's about making what we call reasonable adjustments for people to be able to work, you know, anywhere and in any part of the, you know, film and TV animation industry. So we've done an awful lot of work on that, and it's the employers. We run these sessions, and the employers that come into these sessions walk away with a huge amount of information which they didn't have, and they feel a lot more relieved about okay, we can do this, and you know, it's just really just getting it out in the open and talking about it. So we definitely are on that path already. As I say, we've started it within animation, but it's been very successful so far in terms of from our employers' point of view and what they're learning from it. So we will be rolling that out across film and television as well, just not just within animation. And this is for deaf, blind, as well as neurodiverse, as well as anyone with a physical disability. And we have these people on panels talking about it, and it is really some small adjustments that an employer has to make to make somebody feel welcome, and for us as Film London to be seen as an organisation that is using the right language on our website, for instance. I mean, that kind of stuff, it's really, really important. So that's the disability stuff that we're doing. Our Equal Access Network, slightly different. Our Equal Access Network is something we started sort of about 4 years ago, which was to make sure that our young people in London, and those from very disadvantaged backgrounds, from socio-economic disadvantaged backgrounds, or from backgrounds of people that are not coming from the creative industries at all, and who do not go into higher education, and to make them feel welcome in the film and television production industry, because there is work for them. There's tons of work for them. And we don't want, my sort of mantra is kind of like, I don't want our young people thinking that their career prospects are basically till number 5 at the local supermarket. Right? But because they don't come from a creative background, that they don't have that there isn't work for them, because there absolutely is. We've already, in the previous panel, if you were here for the previous panel, we were talking about the growth of production in London and all the studio spaces that have now emerged in the last 5, 6, 7 years. So a studio is an excellent employer for anyone, because we need everybody from security, cleaners, admin, and all that kind of stuff, right across the spectrum, so to the more creative jobs, and so therefore these can be jobs for local people if the studio is being built in the area. So our Equal Access Network now has 4,000 young people from London on our books, and what we do, we've got a great initiative which in the previous slideshow was us launching this over in Los Angeles with the Mayor of London, with NBC Universal. So we've got these young people that we've identified. We give them training, we give them mentoring, we do CV clinics with them. We get them as ready as far as we can. Then we're putting them into work, because we've got the pool of young people. We've got the employers who know that we've got the pool of young people, so they come to us. And they know they're going to get somebody that has had an element of, say, mentoring. But with NBC Universal, they're going on to amazing shows or films, and they're getting their first taste of working in production. So the first film that some of our young people are going to be are currently working on is Fast and Furious 10. I mean, that's not a bad start, And then
it's not an indie.
It's not an indie. That's right, absolutely. And not too shabby. And the other film that with NBC Universal that we're doing this on is Wicked. I mean, it's wicked. I mean, it's literally wicked, and in every sense of the word. So we have got the pool, and we're farming them out. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. And it's just kind of like into the industry, and they're staying there. And one of the problems that we also have is just kind of making sure that when people are trained up and everything, that they then stay when they don't, because we have a retaining problem as well, because then they go off and everything. We want them to stay. But this is what our Equal Access Network does. We have over 300 languages spoken in London, and so we need to make sure that those languages are being reflected in the work that we do, and in the films that are being made and the films that are coming out of London. So it's a great way to involve all the communities, whether it's race, gender, whatever it might be. We want to make sure that it's reflective of the community that we live within in London, which is such a cosmopolitan city.
Wow, well said. Thank you, Helena.
Turn it over to Ms. Brenda Gilbert, who's here with us. And I'll just start it off by saying, thank you again for joining us. And something I learned in film school is that film is a language. So through that spectrum, talk a little bit about your work as a producer and an executive, and how you use the language of film, to talk about these issues as well.
Absolutely. First of all, I'm very thankful to be here and really, really love this festival. First time in person.
And I really want to thank Helena Mckenzie, who set me up with JL. If you can believe, only a year ago, and we're like fast friends, all of us. And then through that, obviously, Adrian Wooten for your support, your love, and your encouragement. And Patty, I've fallen in love with you. So super sweet, super encouraging. And Enos, thank you so much for your support and making sure that I was here on time. I'm hydrated, and I'm doing really well. And why I do this and why I say thank you to people is because it takes more than a village to do what we're doing. Regardless of where we are, and Helena just talked about the types of jobs that one can have within the industry, and working yourself up that proverbial ladder, which is really important. So just getting back to the question that was asked me, I just wanted to say my thank yous. And Raquel, oh my God, you're so amazing, and everybody else that's up here too, really appreciate it. So can you repeat the question again, JL?
Yes, film is a language.
I'm okay now.
You've already talked, but yes.
I was joking, actually, knew what it was.
No, you got me. All right.
I did.
It's almost happy hour, by the way, guys. So we're getting there.
I'm parched a little bit. Seriously speaking, but it's just film is a language. And one of the things, Raquel, that you just said that really resonated with me is anybody that is seen as diverse in some capacity, we are thankful that somebody's taking a risk. And I want us to change that language. We're not risks. You're not taking a chance on us. You're having an opportunity. And so if we can have that mindset, that's very, very important to us, because it changes the narrative to something that's very, very positive. That language, we have to make sure that is really important to see ourselves on screen in a very positive manner. So the language is to make sure that it's positive, that we have positive stereotypes, that the reality of seeing ourselves in particular roles that are empowering, that are uplifting and inspiring, to see ourselves in leadership roles, because if you can see it, you can be it. Am I right?
Right.
And our on-screen realities often become our off-screen realities, which are so important. So at BRON, a lot of times what we look for is story. Is there global resonance? What are the themes? Can they travel? Can we start a conversation? Can we have accompanying pieces that are educational? Can we have social impact alongside of that? So on our doc side of things, we actually have curriculum that has been made for particular projects, so that we can implement them not just from our age group and older age group, but also in middle schools and high schools. And it's really, really important to extend the lifespan of our content, because we want it to live. We want it to live in libraries. We want it to live in education. We want it to live in homes. We want it to live in books. We want it to live in any type of content that we have. Storytelling is a love language, JL. It truly is, because you have to be passionate about what you're doing. And if you're not passionate about what you're doing, there's not going to be any continuity. There's not going to be any sustainability in what we do.
Right. No, well said. Thank you, Brenda. No, that's incredible. And and I think what's most inspiring to me about this panel is that, a lot of times when we touch on the subject of diversity or the lack thereof, it just becomes like a complaint session, like, oh, this is wrong with the world and this. And again, what I mentioned before, be the change. Each and every one of you is doing just that. You know the challenges. You're not just sitting home and complaining and throwing your hands up in the air. You're actually changing the way things are done and the way people view certain groups and certain people, and making it more acceptable, which is, I think, probably the most powerful thing I can say about this panel, is that you're not just saying things or complaining, you guys are actually doing. And I think that that's important and empowering even to our delegates and our audience, that each and every one of you have a very powerful voice that you can use to the same ends simply by telling your stories. And I think that's so important, especially in a community like Miami-Dade County that's so diverse, so multicultural. We have so many things to say, and especially us Latinos, we like to speak loudly about and voice our opinions, and I think that's super important. So, Prashant, obviously, you've made films here. You're a part of our community as well. And just, talk a little bit more about what you see as sort of the future of this industry. You're going to be on a technology panel, so I'm actually promoting your tomorrow panel today.
And just talk about, just the future of our industry and how things can continue to change and accelerate because, as you mentioned, technology is evolving. We have so much power just with our cell phones now to tell stories, and just talk a little bit about, what you see as the future of this industry.
I mean, the future of the industry is, of course, always evolving. And given where we are today as a producer, and I'm sure Brenda would resonate, and people who want to produce in the room, the biggest challenge that we face is we all have stories. Doesn't matter big or small. We all have stories to tell, or we get pitched stories to tell. But the first and foremost is the financing, like who's going to pay, who's going to fund it. And of course, as a producer, we always look into opportunities, whether we go to a bank or we go to a private equity, or we go to state for rebate, or we go to a nation, whether it's UK, giving a cash rebate. But prior to all that, the most important fact is that if I get funded, how am I going to do the ROI? What is my return of investments? Whether it's a bank, whether it's a private institute, or whether it's a private equity person. And today I see that technology is the first and foremost which has always helped, because if producers did not have digital distribution and had only theatrical, there would be a less revenue coming to them. And given today now the digital world is changing and evolving into NFTs and metaverse and the new technology and the bitcoins, of course, it has taken a slump in the last 1 month, and it has dumped the whole economy.
Sure.
But I personally think that is the new future, and Bitcoin and NFTs and metaverse is what is going to help the technology to make storytelling far, far more than what we dinosaurs have been making films. And I personally think that, whether it's diversity or inclusion and everything, all that will evolve into the metaverse. And that's what the new future is. That's what the new studios is going to be. Bricks and mortar will always remain, but I think it's a dinosaur way of making films. And the future is the metaverse, is the NFTs, and it's the blockchain, and it's the cryptos, and it's no more language of, which currency should I take when I go to London to shoot, or whether how will I do my exchange from my US bank to or my India bank or to the UK bank. All this has to evolve because all these are, I would call it the financial bureaucracy, and these evolving changes is going to help the future of filmmaking, a future of technology.
Yeah, no, obviously that's a great point. Absolutely. Emily, I just want to turn it to you before we go back to the audience for some Q&A. Talk a little bit about, as an artist, as an actor that obviously, like you mentioned, comes from a multicultural, multi-ethnic home, to a young artist like yourself, let's say 10 years ago, or is just getting started. What advice would you give them in terms of how to break into the industry, how to have a voice when, they're part of a certain group that may not always be recognized?
Yeah, of course. This industry is really tough, and I don't mean to say that in a discouraging way. I mean to say that in a way where you have to go into it believing in yourself more than anybody else will, because there is a lot more rejection than there is exception. And I say that in an audition, aspect. My partner Mina Masood, who was supposed to be here today, even his story, he so badly wanted to share his story with you guys as well. Because one of his stories is just incredible. I had the support of my father and my parents wanting me to do the arts and be in the industry and pushing me to, go to acting classes and dance classes and investing in my career and my future, which has obviously paid off and I'm very grateful for. But somebody like Mina didn't have that. His parents and his family were all doctors, engineers, they're Egyptian. So that's what they wanted him to continue. He was supposed to be the doctor of the family, and he actually got accepted to the University of Toronto to study neuroscience. He was going to be a brain surgeon. And in the first year of him sitting there, he was so miserable, and he said, I can't do this. I want to make my parents happy. They've sacrificed so much to come here from Egypt. And I want to show them that their sacrifice and their immigration to Canada was worth every penny, but I am not happy. And I've got to sleep with myself every night knowing that I've got to be happy with my future and the career that I choose. And so he didn't tell them, but he auditioned for Ryerson University, which is one of the top leading acting schools in Canada and North America. And they only accept, I mean, they've got thousands of applicants, and I believe they only accept 20 or 30. So he didn't tell them, he auditioned, he prepared for it so much so that he was so passionate and you know, strong-headed in what he was going to do and believing in himself, and he got accepted. And of course he told his parents, and that was just, you know, they weren't accepting of it. They didn't really support it. They just were like, you're going to seriously become a server at a restaurant and just go to theater school? Okay, cool. So they're like, where's the stability going to come from? And, you know, of course, then he moved to LA. He had booked Jack Ryan out of Montreal, and he did a short role in that for season 1. Moved to LA, and he saw an audition notice for Aladdin. And he said, well, I'm just going to audition. I mean, whatever. They're never going to pick me. I'll just send in a tape. He didn't hear back for about 8 months. And then all of a sudden he heard back, and his manager from Toronto had called him and said, hey, you remember that audition that you really wanted like almost a year ago? And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, Aladdin. So they want you to test tomorrow. So you're going to fly to London to test with Guy Ritchie. And so he did that, and he proved to his parents that because he believed in himself and because of all the rejection that he had ever faced from being a child all the way up into working in the industry for, you know, at the age of about 18, and all that rejection he got from all those auditions, that he was the one chosen out of, you know, thousands and thousands of actors that they were auditioning for a year. He was the one chosen to play Aladdin, and it was, you know, Disney thought it was going to make like $500,000, ended up making over $1 billion. So that just goes to show that if you believe in yourself and like the power of manifesting and believing in yourself and not giving up to anybody else's, you know, rejections or disbelief in yourself, you can make it. It might, you know, look at Bryan Cranston. He didn't become anything, you know, I mean, he was acting for a long time, but Bryan Cranston became who he was when he was in his 50s because of Breaking Bad. So Brie Larson, too, she was on the verge of quitting. I mean, until her film, I believe it's called Home, if I'm not mistaken, or Room. When Room came out, that's when she made it, and she was in her late 30s. So it does take time. These things don't happen overnight. I know sometimes it's discouraging because you see these kids in Euphoria, and you're like, well, they're 18 years old. What the heck? You know, everyone's path is different, and I do believe that the universe, you know, has your own path for you. So stick to it, believe in yourself, you know, hustle, do a little thing. One of my acting coaches at Lee Strasberg told me that if you do one little thing for your career every single day, even if it's 5 minutes, you're still putting in that energy. And energy is never created or destroyed, it's just transferred. So continue on your path and believe in yourself.
Well said. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes, and we'll have one more session, and then our happy hour, I must mention. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Dharma Jin is going to be sponsoring our networking reception at 6 p.m. But before we transition, I know we have about 5 minutes for Q&A if you guys are cool with taking some questions from our audience. Any questions for our diversity panel? I see a hand here in the middle.
Yep. Hi. I noticed during my time as a tour guide, I've seen a lot of people come from all over the world to Miami. And I've seen a lot of people from the UK, a lot of people from Brazil. Do you see something here in Miami in regards to talent, in regards to stories, you know, as far as us locals, and you know the environment, the city? Is it possible to?
I would say yes, absolutely. That's why we come and do all this work with MMFM, because we actually see the talent here. There's so many storytelling. I mean, you know, it's all about stories, right? And it's really, really important to make sure that every story is heard as much as possible, and that cultures are looked into, and that you don't stay in your own kind of like safe zone, what have you, that you explore other cultures, and that is done by storytelling, film, TV. That's a way to learn and to enrich yourself in other cultures. So absolutely, and Miami is well located, not only just from a US point of view, but also with the Latin American communities and countries too. So absolutely, yeah, there's tons of stuff to be learned from by us.
Yes,
from you.
Thank you. And if I may add, Miami was founded by a woman.
Yes.
Julia.
Two women. Two women that struck a very interesting deal.
Absolutely.
And then to add to that, one woman that's sitting on this panel, Commissioner Regalado, is responsible that we're here this year. And she believed in us, and we're able to.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. Okay, we have a question right here.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dorian Monroe. I have a question for Brenda Gilbert. I just was curious if diversity is kind of like what the conversation is at BRON when acquiring projects or deciding to produce projects. Judas and the Black Messiah and Licorice Pizza are probably like on opposite ends of the spectrum. I'm just curious, like, what that conversation is like, behind closed doors in terms of what type of projects you all want to take on and how much diversity is a factor.
First and foremost, if you look at me, I don't always blend well into a crowd. So I always push diversity all the time whenever I can. With respect to Licorice Pizza, it was part of a slate deal at MGM. You also have to tell those types of stories too, because it's a curated piece. But if you look at our repertoire, you look at our CV, you look at our resume in terms of content, it's not just Judas and the Black Messiah. It's Birth of a Nation, it's Fences, it's Roman J. Israel, it's Respect from last year. And also what we try to do is not just only show that type of content with strong Black protagonists or people of color or different cultures, but also behind the camera, which is really, really important too. We gave Melina Mitsakis her directorial debut for Queen and Slim. Right. We also, Nia DaCosta, not necessarily a directorial debut, but an opportunity to direct Candyman, which is really, really important. We also look at women as well, and Reed Morano, we also gave her a directorial debut. She later on won an Emmy for Handmaid's Tale. Jennifer Kent for Nightingale. And what she did was she had filmed in Australia and made sure that there was a revival of the language over there. And not only that, she asked for the lands to be blessed before we actually started filming, which is very, very important and respectful. So diversity behind closed doors is very open book for me because I push it wherever I can, regardless of whether it's on the animation format, whether it's TV for us, whether it's non-scripted. We just had the closing film at Tribeca. Loudmouth, we're also doing the Reggie Jackson documentary as well. So it doesn't matter the format, whether it's narrative, non-scripted, live action, whether it's animation, whether it's also in the companies that we've invested in, whether it's also us going into the tech space as well, Prashant, too. So we're thinking about that. We always have diversity on the first and foremost part of our minds because I'm leading the company alongside my husband.
There you go. I think on that we can wrap it up. But this was an incredibly powerful panel. So thank you all so much for being such a great example of leaders in your community.